Number 1. The Treaty of Versailles.
Ever had that foggy post-party hangover, waking up to a chaotic scene and wondering, what the hell happened last night? So Germany of September 1945, the end of World War II, but instead of a trashed apartment, they faced city ruins, and instead of unanswered texts, they grappled with isolation, economic ruin, and numerous human casualties. And who was that overeager friend relentlessly serving the drinks? A loudy guy with a small mustache, pouring shots of nationalism, racism, and militarism. But what really led an advanced 80 million people nation to follow Hitler? Was it just his charisma? To understand this, we'll need to rewind a bit to 1919, to the end of World War I and the Treaty of Versailles. Amidst the ruins and echoes of battle, the leaders of the victorious Allied nations convened in Paris at the Palace of Versailles to dictate the terms of peace. This was not just any peace treaty, it was a document that would redraw the map of Europe and lay the groundwork for the future, both politically and economically. Germany, fresh from the tumult of war and political upheaval, found itself at the mercy of the victors. The armistice of November 1918 had brought an end to the fighting, but the true consequences were yet to be realized. As delegates from the United States, Britain, France, and other Allied countries gathered, the atmosphere was charged with a mix of relief and revenge. At the heart of the negotiations stood the Big Three: U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, British Prime Minister Lloyd George, and French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau, known as the Tiger. Each brought his own vision to the table, Wilson with his idealistic 14 points, Lloyd George balancing between punishment and pragmatism, and Clemenceau's desire for revenge and for preventing any chance of future German aggression. The Treaty of Versailles, born from these negotiations, was more than a peace agreement, it was a verdict on Germany's role in the war. The treaty imposed territorial losses, military restrictions, and most significantly, legendary war reparations. These demands would not only cripple Germany's economy, but also sow the seeds of resentment and instability, with repercussions that would echo throughout the 20th century. On June 28, 1919, the treaty was signed. Germany, already grappling with the war's severe results and a crippling naval blockade, faced a new challenge: the harsh terms of the peace agreement. The German delegation, headed by Foreign Minister Hermann Müller, was given a stark ultimatum: sign the treaty or face the possibility of renewed hostilities. With the nation still reeling from the effects of war, including widespread starvation and political upheaval, they didn't really have much choice. As Müller and his colleagues signed the treaty, they committed Germany to a series of huge war reparations. The Allied powers demanded compensation not just for the physical destruction caused by the war, but also for a wide range of economic losses. The reparations included payments in gold, industrial goods like coal and wood, and even territories that were rich in natural resources. France in particular sought extensive compensation for the devastation wrought on its lands, and the British even demanded payments for war widows. The scale of the reparations was astonishing. Initially, Germany was to pay 132 billion gold marks over 2 years, but the final amount was to be determined later, with estimates reaching astronomical figures. These demands placed an unprecedented financial burden on the already weakened German economy, forcing the nation into a precarious position of trying to rebuild itself while shackled by debt. Amidst this backdrop of economic pressure, Germany was also subjected to territorial losses and military restrictions, further deepening the sense of national humiliation. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in the fancy Hall of Mirrors, was not just a peace agreement, but a symbol of Germany's defeat and the heavy cost it would bear in the following decades.
Yep, sounds pretty bad for the Germans. But as my grandmother always says, think about the end before you start. But anyway, how this event could have shaped world's history, and where's the promised relation to crazy little Hitler? He was only a simple soldier, if I remember correctly.
Well, the treaty's effect was much beyond the borders of Germany. In Germany itself, the burden of these reparations, combined with territorial losses and military restrictions, led to severe economic hardships. The German government, desperate to meet the reparations payments, resorted to printing more money. This decision triggered the biggest hyperinflation of all time, devaluing the German mark to the point of worthlessness. From 4 marks per dollar, the mark plumped so drastically that its lowest exchange rate was 4 trillion marks per one single US dollar. Unbelievable. People had to carry wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy some groceries. The hyperinflation obviously caused widespread poverty and despair among the German public. Politically, the harsh terms of the treaty and the economic turmoil created a fertile ground for extremism. Adolf Hitler, then a relatively unknown populist figure, capitalized on the general sense of betrayal and injustice. He used the Treaty of Versailles as a rallying cry, blaming Germany's sufferings on the treaty and the supposed stab in the back by internal enemies. This narrative helped him gain widespread support, eventually leading to his rise to power, and from there, the way to World War II and the Holocaust was short. Internationally, the treaty's impact was also profound. It redrew the map of Europe, creating new nations and altering borders, but it failed to establish a lasting peace. The punitive nature of the treaty and the economic strains it imposed contributed to political instability and resentment, laying the groundwork for future conflicts.
Wow, Dan! Great story! I mostly like your hangover analogy. It is so funny. You deserve a like. Dear viewers, please like the video. It's important to Dan. He works very hard.
If someone planned to hit the like, he is now reconsidering. Why do we need him with us, Dan?
Mostly to make people wonder what is going on in this video.
Number 2. The oil crisis.
It was October 6, 1973, 2 p.m., Israel. At the peak of the Jewish holiest day of Yom Kippur, while people are fasting and gathering in synagogues across the country, a combined and surprising attack by Egypt in the south and Syria in the north dropped the Middle East and later the whole world into a chaos that will end up with the first and the largest global oil crisis.
Allow me to interrupt you, Dan, but everybody knows it was October the 7th, not the 6th.
October 7th is a completely different story, but I can understand your confusion. The October 7th massacre of 2023 was executed by the Hamas terror organization, exactly 50 years after the Yom Kippur attack. How romantic of them. But to be more accurate, it was 50 years and 1 day. Do you guys know why Hamas decided to wait one more day with their horrific atrocities? This question has only one clear answer, and it's not because Israel increased its alertness for the war's 50th anniversary. They did not. If you think you know, write to us in the comments.
Yes, write to us in the comments. And you, young lady, stop interrupting Dan. He works very hard.
Anyway, let's get back to our story. The 1973 oil crisis began with the Yom Kippur War, a conflict that extended beyond regional borders and triggered economic shockwaves worldwide. In this tense period, the United States, along with other Western nations, stepped in to support Israel. The U.S. initiated Operation Nickel Grass, a strategic airlift to provide Israel with critical military supplies that eventually played a crucial role in Israel's magnificent victory. This move was seen by Arab nations as direct support for Israel against their interests. In response to Western intervention, OPEC's Arab members implemented an oil embargo against the U.S. and its allies, drastically cutting oil production. This decision sent oil prices soaring and led to widespread fuel shortages, profoundly affecting the economies of oil-reliant nations. The 1973 oil crisis underscored the West's dependence on Middle Eastern oil and the geopolitical risks associated with this reliance. It prompted a reevaluation of energy policies and heightened awareness of the need for diversified energy sources. The impact on oil prices was immediate and dramatic. In just a few weeks, the price of crude oil skyrocketed, jumping from around $3 per barrel to nearly $12 by January 1974. This quadrupling of oil prices caused widespread economic shock. Western nations, especially the United States, faced the brunt of this crisis. Long lines at gas stations and fuel shortages became the norm, profoundly disrupting daily life and industrial activities. In response, the U.S. government implemented several emergency measures, including fuel rationing, reduced speed limits, and adjusted daylight saving time to conserve energy. Despite these efforts, the rapid increase in oil prices led to higher inflation and triggered a global recession.
Global recession. Big deal. You know, Dan, it wasn't the first global economic crisis. This recession was nothing compared to the Great Depression. And it is only one example. I don't understand what unusual effect this crisis had that you decided to include it in this video.
Hey, I told you to stop interrupting him. He
Works very hard, blah blah blah. Now let him answer my question.
So basically, you're right. It wasn't the biggest economic crisis the world knew, not even close to. However, the oil crisis fundamentally altered global energy politics. The crisis accelerated the search for alternative energy sources, made nations start investing a lot of money in renewable energy like solar, wind, and even nuclear power, while also seeking oil supplies outside the Middle East. The crisis also underscored the importance of energy conservation and efficiency, something that sounds obvious to us today. But it is also obvious to us that smoking hurts our health, while 50 years ago it wasn't obvious even for doctors. This energy shift had broader geopolitical implications. Western countries, recognizing the risks of relying heavily on Middle Eastern oil, diversified their energy strategies. In addition, you can see unnatural alliances until our days, such as Saudi Arabia and the US. The oil crisis's impact reached beyond energy policies. In the UK, for example, it exacerbated economic problems, contributing to higher inflation and unemployment, what set the stage for Margaret Thatcher's rise to power. Thatcher, known as the Iron Lady, was elected in part due to the economic difficulties worsened by the oil crisis, leading to her significant economic reforms that changed the UK economy forever. And considering the adoption of Thatcherism by President Reagan in the US and many other leaders around the world, even including Soviet Union's Gorbachev, I can say that these reforms not only changed the UK economy but the global economy as a whole.
The Iron Lady? Wow, I love her. She worked very hard. Dan, please choose Margaret Thatcher's reforms to be the last chapter of this video. Viewers will enjoy it and will subscribe for sure.
You are so strange. Number 3. The Iron Lady.
So I plan to write a chapter about the Iron Lady and her far-reaching economic reforms. I have so much to say about Margaret Thatcher, one of the most influential leaders in modern history, but I really don't like to create videos of more than 12 minutes. So instead, I invite you to watch our video with the full story of the Iron Lady. I enjoyed so much to create it. Here. On the right, click it.